and welcome to The Base. I'm your host, Michael Atterbury. In this show, we look at all things related to economic development in the city of Milwaukee. The focus of today's show is the Menomonee River Valley and the Harbor District. Joining me later to discuss these areas will be Bruce Keys, an attorney who has served on multiple development boards, and David Holmes, an environmental consultant with extensive experience in urban redevelopment. First up, we take a look at the Menomonee Valley, an area that has been an industrial center for the city for over a century. Like the city around it, the valley has seen years of robust growth, steep decline, and everything in between. Its current revitalized state is the result of work done by the city, businesses, and nonprofits. Here's more.
Development really happened over the last 20 years or so. And it really, to me, it started with the most recent Menomonee Valley plan that took place in 1998.
Bringing that plan to fruition depended on the work of a diverse group, one that wouldn't necessarily come together on its own.
I think that one of the key pieces in the public-private partnership in the Menomonee Valley was the identification of an individual to lead the creation of the Menomonee Valley Partners Board.
With new leadership, the Menomonee Valley Partners continue to play a critical part.
So our primary role is convener and facilitator. So we are basically the table around which all these partners come together.
After the necessary parties signed on, certain challenges to developing the valley became apparent.
Before 1970, there weren't environmental laws, so a lot of those businesses really could do whatever they wanted with their raw materials, with their finished products, some of the waste that they had. And so we had to deal a lot with the environmental condition.
To the outside observer, the valley may have seemed like a lost cause.
But the perception was much worse than the reality. When we started, I think people by and large thought the valley the whole thing was a Superfund site, and it was contaminated and unsafe, and the public safety was really an issue down there.
The Department of City Development did much of the important work early on in the development.
That was a prototypical brownfield, an underutilized or abandoned property that had real or perceived contaminants. And so our job was to remedy that, clean up the environmental conditions, put in the infrastructure, working with our friends at Public Works, and then begin selling real estate to industrial users in the Menomonee Valley Industrial Center.
Early buyers of the real estate made a strong impact on the rest of the valley.
And then once we had a few businesses who really made those leaps of faith and were the first to build down here, it was kind of like dominoes. Once someone was here, people could see the potential, and those first businesses who came in were really the best ambassadors we could have had.
One of the first new businesses to the valley was Gallagher Hydronic Solutions, a manufacturer of components used in heating and cooling systems.
Being one of the first tenants in the business park, we've been very satisfying seeing a lot of the other businesses come in and develop buildings and presence in the valley. So it's been quite satisfying, and it's nice to see that all the lots are filling up, and the city has done a very good job of promoting the business park.
The company's decision to move to the valley was not taken lightly.
We were originally in Franklin, Wisconsin, about 20 minutes south of here, and in 2007 we had decided to look for a new facility, and after a pretty extensive search of existing buildings, we had decided to build a facility, and decided on the valley mainly because of its location so close to the heart of the city.
However, obstacles to building in the valley persisted.
There is a substantial amount of methane that's underneath the ground here. So when we built our facility, we needed to put in a methane barrier that would stop the methane from coming up into the building. So the lots here were preloaded with soil to compress it and make sure the earth wasn't moving anymore. The methane barrier was put down, and then once that was put down, we could not pierce that at all.
Despite those challenges, there were signs of potential.
And as related to this particular site, what we liked about it was, well, it was being redeveloped. It was the old converting to the new. It was going to be a concentration of neighbors very similar to us, being light manufacturers. And from the standpoint of the employee, it's very nice to move into a new facility.
And Kalefi isn't done. In the coming years, more change is expected.
And so we're looking at pushing the wall out by original design, and because of the green space needs and requirements of the city of Milwaukee, we can basically double this facility in terms of floor space, which means that, well, roughly speaking, we could double the business. And so we're at that point now, which seemed like a long way off back then, but we're at that point of decision right now.
Back at the Menomonee Valley Partners, seeing the transformation of the valley up close has been remarkable.
Had more than 300 acres of brownfield land redeveloped. 39 businesses have either moved into the valley or existing businesses expanded their footprints in the valley. More than 5,000 jobs have been created. And we have over 60 acres of parks and trails.
Even after all of that, there are still areas for development in the Menomonee Valley.
Most of what was in that plan has been accomplished, and so now we're taking a step back and looking at what's left to do. And we still have a considerable amount. I think the largest is the east end of the valley, really between 16th and 6th Street. We have almost 40 acres of riverfront land that's mostly undeveloped, and so we'll be working to come up with a development plan for that, attracting businesses and jobs and creating public access to the river.
Using past development as a roadmap, there is reason to believe that this remaining land will better the city in more ways than one.
Here now to talk more about the Valley, Bruce Keys, an attorney at Foley & Lardner, and David Holmes, an environmental consultant with Stantec Consulting. Thank you both for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, so starting off, I'm really interested to hear from the both of you about your experience with the redevelopment of the Menomonee Valley, either as direct participants or as observers.
Well, I can. I'd be happy to start. My initial exposure to the valley dates back to the early mid 1990s, and there was actually a group of people who used to do a fat tire tour of Milwaukee. Kind of a bike ride around Milwaukee to see the underbelly, and the valley was part of that tour. And so my first exposure to the Shops property on the west end of the valley was a little surreptitious, riding through this abandoned brownfield site, and I remember seeing the big board where they had the number of days since the last injury still written on there. The spin forward a couple of years, and then Mayor Norquist became very interested in really focusing on the valley as an economic opportunity. So I got involved through a combination of factors, but there was an opportunity to help form a board, to help form a private-public partnership, which ultimately became Menomonee Valley Partners. So a group of us came together, and it was identified by the city in their land use plan to have this public-private partnership. And I've been on the board since then, involved in the board and involved in management. So I've seen a lot of the properties transform, and it feels slow to me, but if you step back, I think it was probably a pretty quick transformation.
So you've really been there since the beginning then, huh?
Yeah, and much of my involvement has also been on the Hank Aaron State Trail, getting that constructed.
Okay. Thank you.
I worked on it as a consultant, and originally for the city of Milwaukee back in the early 90s when they were also looking at the CMC shop site, and then subsequently for some other companies, Potawatomi, which has done a lot of interesting things in the valley, and some other private developments.
Okay, thank you. Now, Bruce, looking back at the valley in the late 90s, after being neglected for so many years, what do you think it was, in your opinion, that motivated the redevelopment?
There was a land use plan, but it was also an economic development plan. And there was a recognition that Milwaukee had a number of areas that were both opportune for redevelopment, but also long neglected. One of the things I think is that the city leadership needs to decide, and has, constantly has to decide, is where they prioritize, where they put their resources. And so the valley presented an opportunity that was sort of unique. It was kind of a blank slate because it had a lot of acreage. It had neighboring populations to the north and south, but not a lot of really no residential population in the valley. And so I think the decision then is, where do you put resources? It was seen as a prime opportunity if you could harness the resources. And really, the thinking was that it would be the engine to fuel further growth. So let's get businesses into the valley and then continue into some of the other areas that need redevelopment. And I think we've seen the city leadership really put a focus now on 30th Street corridor and moving on to other areas, as well as the Harbor District.
So it's really done exactly what you guys were hoping it was going to do then, in terms of spreading out around the area.
Yeah. It's it's the feel of the valley is a little bit different than what we had anticipated. There's more of an entertainment component to it, and we've grown to realize that there's actually a really nice mix. You have Palermo's Pizza, for instance, which is production, but they have a cafe. Harley Davidson, which is all about making stuff in Milwaukee, but they have a museum. So it's a really good opportunity to showcase our products. And I think the economic development has been wonderful, and I do think that we're starting to see the effects reverberate through the city and other opportunities.
Okay, thanks. And
I think you have seen a lot of development too down Miller Park Way that was tied to that. Most of it in West Milwaukee, but also there's been a huge transformation that's occurred there.
I think that's right.
yeah, and David, in the valley, in terms of economic and environmental interests, it seems that they're pretty well aligned. So would you say that that's accurate? And if so, is that unusual?
I mean, they are definitely aligned in many interesting ways. I think the environmental cleanup was the big obstacle at first, although I think when they started really looking at the valley, they figured out that it really wasn't as bad as they had thought.
Okay.
I think there were other environmental issues too, like flooding, that were also sometimes addressed as part of the contamination. Like I think in the Valley Industrial Park, they ended up putting up, I think, 10 feet of fill over the whole thing, which raised it out of the floodplain and also capped the soil. But what's interesting to me is the greater meaning of environmental in terms of just the restoration of the Menomonee River and the creation of green space and the stormwater park. So it's gone beyond just like addressing with contamination to really restoring the environment and creating sort of a amazing combination of environmental a cool environment, that doesn't make sense, but it mixed in with old and new industry. It's really a fascinating mix, and it's worked very well.
So, and I credit guys like David in his industry for being able to say, it used to be you had contaminated property, contaminated land, and you would just cap it, and you couldn't think creatively about it. And I really think that the consulting world has done a great job of thinking differently about that and thinking how can you have restored marshland, restored wetlands, restored flood waters, but have that in combination with the factories. And we hear from the businesses who have located there that, we heard in the segment just now about Caleffi, where they, because they don't have to deal with some of the on-site environmental management issues like stormwater, they're able to build to the full footprint of their property, and stormwater's handled off-site as part of this large stormwater park, which is really then becomes an amenity. So to me, it's a fascinating synthesis of economic development and environmental restoration, environmental good.
All right, sweet. And so next, let's focus on the Harbor District. The development of this land's just begun, and there's a lot of exciting possibilities that have already started up. And so this next report is going to cover some issues related to the harbor and introduces some tenets of the new Global Water Center. Take a look.
Great.
Looking forward, the Department of Development has shifted some of its focus to the Harbor District, an area of 1,000 acres just south of downtown.
We also identified some other needs in the city, and one of those was the harbor, the inner harbor area, that to us, in looking at the valley with much of it being developed by rail over the last 100 years, in the harbor it was waterfront, and we saw an opportunity for not only some additional potential housing, but primarily for our industrial base. And what we were seeing is that a lot of economic development was moving towards the harbor area, from the 3rd Ward to Walker's Point to the harbor, and we wanted to be in a position to leverage that momentum, but also protect it in a lot of ways, because the harbor, in particular the port of Milwaukee, is an economic engine of itself.
Still in the early stages, the city will be engaged with the area for some time.
From my personal perspective, I'll be spending a lot more time on the inner harbor. We're just beginning the process of where we felt like we were in the valley 15 years ago. And it's not something that's going to change overnight. In the valley, we learned that it took a good 10, 15 years before we got to where we are today.
Milwaukee as a center for the water industry has already spurred growth and development in the Harbor District. In September 2013, a former warehouse opened its doors as a dynamic new enterprise.
The way the building is structured is, number one, it's called the Global Water Center. The Water Council is kind of the main tenant. We do not own it. There's separate owners to that. But everybody in here has something to do with water. There are startups, small businesses, large businesses, 100-year-old businesses, education, government, nonprofits, and that is the synergy of the whole building.
With such a wide range of tenants, the Water Council takes on many roles to ensure that things run smoothly.
Convener, facilitator, broker. We don't make water companies, we just make them better. And the way we do that is bringing people together.
One company new to the building is Ingenus.
The company provides solutions to monitor and manage water level. For example, on sewer water with devices, autonomous devices. So we install those devices on the field, and we collect information, data, and we push them to a cloud or to your computer to be able to receive and monitor and manage a sewer network.
While the companies are all connected to water, the kind of work being done is diverse.
WaterHub is a data mining and analytics company. What we do is we match water technology companies with the needs of water and wastewater systems to ultimately create better outcomes for water resources.
For Ingenus, the benefits of being at the water center were felt early on.
I think for me, it permits to save time. I mean, I arrived here, I met so many people directly, important people who are working, they are connecting to the water field.
The opportunity for collaboration and growth have been major draws for the center.
Needed a place where we could, as we develop our business, we could have interactions with innovators in the water industry that come from various backgrounds, from startups, researchers, investors, large companies, and Brew sort of provided this very unique melting pot of all these different stakeholders in one area.
Already, signs of success are not hard to find at the water center.
We already had one main customer who is Veolia. Veolia is a company who is managing water in general, providing and treating water, for example, for water treatment plant. So we are working with them in France. We have some common project there and here also.
And success from the start has some occupants of the water center optimistic about the future.
And so I think that's one of the things that's exciting about Milwaukee is that they're fostering that kind of ecosystem. And I think we're in the starting of seeing some tremendous successes coming out of here.
Back now with Bruce Keys and David Holmes. So Bruce, before development, the valley was a brown field. And what's the condition of the land around the harbor like, and what challenges do you think that presents?
The Harbor District is a fairly extensive area, and so I tend to think of it as really three distinct groups of areas. One is just a piece of Walker's Point, touches on the Milwaukee River. The second is Jones Island, and then the third is kind of the area south from Allen Bradley or Rockwell Automation to Bay Street. And so you have these three very different areas. Jones Island is heavily used and is the center of freight. There's some properties there that are maybe not as utilized as they could be. One is referred to as Grand Trunk. And that's going to be very similar issues as we faced in the valley. In the Walker's Point is its own unique neighborhood environment. And there it's more, three-story buildings that are looking for repurposing. And then but the remaining area where you get some of the properties along Greenfield Avenue and Kinnickinnick are older manufacturing properties, and they're smaller sites. And so they're going to have challenges that we didn't really face in the valley, because the valley was predominantly large sites, much easier to deal with. The economics of deals are much easier when you have large sites. So it's a little bit different, and then you throw in the water component, and it becomes really a very different creature in many regards.
All right, thank you. And David, we were talking earlier, and you're a PhD candidate at the new UWM School of Freshwater Sciences. So what can you tell us about the campus, and what kind of work will be done, and what effect do you think it's going to have on the area?
I think it's going to be a major catalyst. I mean, it's still a work in progress, both the facility and the actual scientists, so they're still staffing up a little bit. But the facility, it's open now. It's beautiful. If people haven't been down there, they should really take a look. And they're in the process of completing. I think there's going to be an incredible streetscape with 10 demonstration projects, including, I think, possibly including a salmon stream, or not a salmon stream, but a actual flowing stream for fish spawning.
Okay.
An aquarium. But I think it's going to be, it's already been a catalyst for the proposed, I think, freshwater plaza that's right next to the Rockwell building. That's going to be a significant development. And then I think plans are to remove the coal piles where their We Energies stores their coal now. That's also going to probably be a prime research park site. So I think it's absolutely having an effect already, and it's going to be, I think, magnified as the school continues to build its program.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what the school has to offer, our community. So while we still have some time, let's step back and look at the big picture of what's going on here. And so with the kinds of redevelopment projects we've been talking about, what do you think can be done to maximize the benefits of the bordering neighborhoods and really the city as a whole?
When we look at these projects, we have to be very careful that we make no little plans. And there's really true opportunities to bring tremendous economic development. But if we get trapped in thinking that we can do it without making major investments, that it won't happen. If we make big plans and we really bring this to fruition, then we'll have hundreds of jobs that will be locating and hopefully will be available to the neighborhoods. It's a little tricky because you have different education levels required for different jobs, and so we want to make sure that there's a healthy balance of jobs, and those jobs that really cater to the people who live the closest by are very important.
Okay, thank you.
I think it has had a big. I think that's one of the special things about the Valley, is that it has been focused on a real community thing. I think like the 16th Street Community Health Center was very active in the work that was done in the Valley, which is pretty unusual. I've never seen a health center play that role. I think the Green Bay Packers and others, and the Urban Ecology Center, which is on the just created another facility on the south side of the Menomonee Valley. Those were all intended to cater towards those neighborhoods that have been underserved. So I think it has been.
Well, and to your point, David, all of that was fairly deliberate. There was a recognition that you can't just build it, you have to activate it.
Yeah.
And so having things like the Hank Aaron State Trail and the Urban Ecology Center was specifically courted and planned as a means of creating levels of activity, getting people into the valley. And the same thing is occurring and will occur in the Harbor District, the KK River Trail, but other ways of just getting people out to enjoy the environment. And if we're going to be, as the segment talked about, a city of freshwater industry, we need to look at, and we have to have a city that highlights our freshwater and highlights the opportunities for recreation and interaction.
Yeah, it's really nice that you say that because, one of the strong points I feel of Milwaukee is the community, and it's really nice to know that the community is really helping the environment of, where everyone's living, we're giving back to the community. But turning to some criticism, some skeptics say that there's not much evidence that Milwaukee's a hub for water technology. So what's your feeling in response to that, David?
I feel pretty strongly that it hasn't been hyped enough. I think that what's been done with the rivers, the lakefront, is really extraordinary from a national standpoint, and it fits right in with this water. I mean, we have an incredible freshwater landscape that ties into this water initiative, and I think it's really extraordinary, perhaps unmatched by any other city. So I think we're going to find that this water initiative really is much bigger than people even realize.
It's been really interesting delving, as we think about what should go in the Harbor District, we have to think about what is the economy of Milwaukee. And we are a very, very strong manufacturing economy. And if you look at, we're also really strong in the food industry. But if you look at the stuff that we make, a lot of that goes into the food industry, a lot of it goes into the water or beverage industry. And so there are many, many companies that are making a lot of products that are in the water technology sphere already, but we don't think of them as being water companies. Rockwell is a great example. I mean, a huge amount of their equipment goes into treatment plants, goes into the automation controls for food and beverage. So we are a water-centric city. There's no question about it.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. My thanks to our guests Bruce Keys and David Holmes for sharing their insights, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. Good night.
Good night, and thank you for the opportunity.